We're going back down the Baby Reindeer rabbit hole just one more time to clear up a few things and add a little bit more to the story. This is I Have No Title, Not Much Podcast, the show we're discussing all aspects of pop culture. We are your hosts, Tyler
and Chris.
And I think for Baby Reindeer, one of the biggest things that we left out is there is still a little controversy thrown at Richard Gadd about how he's handled things with his stalker case in this show. And I think one of the biggest things with that is they would not be an issue had the roles been reversed and he was the stalker and Fiona was, the one being stalked.
Yeah. So in the late 20-teens going into this new modern era of ours, post-pandemic, there was a female revolution, a little mini female revolution, especially in Hollywood with teachers. There's violence is on the rise in public and in private against women. And I think this is something that we need to take into account. People like Charlie Rose, Harvey Weinstein, other people who did less egregious things that were never accused of anything so serious, like Louis C.K., still taken out of the public view. Now, I'm not saying Louis C.K. is a good guy. I'm just saying those are two different things. It's like the difference between a fist fight and a serial killer.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to be very clear about that.
Also, before we get too far into our explanation here, I think we should also make it clear that we're not blaming any victims.
No, never.
Or saying that they're wrong. In
fact, the opposite.
Yes. If you are a victim, regardless of your gender, speak up, get help, for sure.
Yes, gather evidence, hold on to clues. Don't think that anything is insignificant, too, because that's what it takes, and that's what Richard Gadd did. That's what I'm saying is in this situation, Richard Gadd was the victim, and some people are even still disregarding him.
Yeah,
because the worst thing I've seen him called is a grifter. He's spinning a grift to get his show on the air, but by saying it's a true story when it was 90%. I mean, who knows? We were not there. It is a fictionalized version of these events. Did he truncate certain things down to saying, I can't make a documentary that would last the sum total of however many hours are in several years, because that's what it would be like to live with somebody and go through that with them. So, because stalking it's it doesn't go away. If you have a traumatic event and if you have say a car accident or a death, it's it happens and it's over and you can seek help. If you even have a mugging or a violent attack committed upon you, it happens, it's over, and then sometimes there's that looming threat in your mind. You can't shake it.
Your worldview of safety has been shattered.
Yeah.
And how do you fix that?
But with a stalker that never goes away, and in this specific situation where he made dumb, bad decisions and freely admits that and shows them to us.
Yeah.
If he were trying to portray himself as a hero, he wouldn't have put himself doing these dumbass things in there. And it became untenable to the point where even the police seemed powerless. And I've heard this story from Laura Ray and several other people who are talking about stalking in Scotland and England in the 80s, 90s, and beyond. I think the laws are changing. They're tightening up. But having said that, this guy, and this is what I wanted to get back to something stupid that I said in the previous, in our actual Baby Reindeer episode, which is something about artists' rights. Artists don't have rights. I know that. We have certain protections, but those aren't specific to artists. Those are basic, freedom of speech. Right, that's kind of it. The same as everybody else, it is in how we use them. There's a version of that in England. It's not the same. I don't think really there is as much. And then it comes down to the yelling of fire argument. You have the freedom of speech. You don't have freedom from consequences. Yes, that is all true.
And context doesn't exist anymore, but that's a different argument.
Right. So what we have here is a guy who everyone has said he has to be forced to protect his stalker. There's no universe that this makes sense to me, that he has to do everything in his power to protect this person. And then when he slips up or puts in there with, some people are saying he specifically put in a roadmap to this person so that people would find her. I mean, if you were a struggling comedian, stand-up comic that was going into acting, and you made that, nobody could have ever predicted how viral this thing would become, and the story and how compelling it is. He definitely didn't.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think that this was his grand master plan, that he was going to dox this person through making a 7-part miniseries about all the stuff in his life while portraying himself as stupid, shallow, egotistical, drug-addled, as that sentence got away from me. Yeah. I had a little David Tennant moment. Sorry. I don't think that that's the way that he would go about doing it, unless he is the master narcissist of all and is just yes, I'll manipulate them through making them feel sorry for me. I'll show them my vulnerable side. Narcissists don't have vulnerable sides, and they definitely don't show them. They don't even pretend most of the time. And I don't know of any case that this would be, unless it's just for spectacle. Maybe I'm wrong about all this, but I've heard the case. I've looked at the emails. I've looked at what she has said, that Fiona, and nothing matches up except what he has said for the most part. How would you convey years of your life being swallowed up and having that stalker on your back, that looming threat never goes away? And even when it does, when it finally does, and when Laura Ray had it worse than he did, to some degree, then it's always there. She's still having issues with it. And freely admits that and is talking about it. Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Well, obviously, the bad guy needs help in this scenario. She needs... I don't know what she needs exactly. I cannot diagnose. I'm not certified to. I would not begin to throw around things that are specifically to make a clinician's diagnosis. I simply cannot do that.
But she needs to see a clinician.
Yeah, she needs to be diagnosed herself. She at least needs firm care and therapy, and to be monitored, I think, with so many people coming forward, which we covered a lot of that in the previous episode. There's even more, and there's new things coming out regularly. It would take a while. I haven't read through every single email, but I've seen enough that there has to be a better way for this. And when Johnny Depp's wife came out and didn't even name names, she just had a blemish on her face and made sure to, and you can look into this, she knew, how did TMZ know exactly where she was going to be coming out at? That they were right there on the spot when she walked out of a building. It was coordinated. It was clearly coordinated. You can look into that if you want to. I watched 95% of that trial. Talk about brain up. I didn't know how to go back to regular life after that. It was while I had a surgery, so I was out of work for the first week of it. And moving on, I was at work, so I couldn't watch as much of it. So I'd get highlights at the end of the day for whatever was done. Or if they weren't done when I got out of work, I'd watch what was going on presently. And I'm not convinced. I was never convinced. I listened to the arguments. I looked at the evidence. Then I looked at, the supporting witnesses. So many of AH's witnesses either dropped out or didn't have as much to say as maybe they previously did, because new information came to light for them. Maybe they'd been coerced. I can't say for certain, but why would a bunch of your friends all of a sudden drop out when they were allegedly there? The police had conflicting things to say that mostly arced toward supporting what that Amber Heard was not being completely truthful. There was so much evidence in his favor, and then just generally how they presented themselves. And at the end of the day, don't play with charities. Don't do it. Either give to them or don't give to them. Start them and then give the money to who you said that money's going to, or don't start a charity. But if you say, I'm going to divorce somebody, I want all your money, but you know what? I don't even want it for me. It's the principle of the thing. I'm going to take it and I'm going to give it to this charity. Yeah, that's right. And he was like, I was going to do that anyway, so I can just donate it directly. And they're like, no, I'll do it. Give it to me. So you give it to them, and then they never give it to that charity. Interesting that. See, pledging to do something is not the same as doing it. And when you tell a jury of your not peers that those are the same thing, and it's like, well, then did you ever give the money to the charity? I mean, it's on my to-do list. Come on. Like, I mean, I've only had like a year. You guys act like this is a really important thing. All right. Like, let's not get bogged down in this. He's a crazy guy. All right.
It's like I meant when I'm done paying my legal fees and running his name through the mud. What's left, I'll give to the charity. Maybe.
Yeah, you just do that immediately. That destroyed her credibility with a lot of people, and that was at the end. I think that's what put the jury over the edge. If she would so flagrantly make up things about this and lie and try to lie to her face, because it's manipulative. It was easily, she intended to keep the money because she did keep the money. To my knowledge, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think she ever gave that money to the charity. If she did, I think maybe she began to give some of it to save some sort of face, but there were a lot of celebrities that gave dog whistles, like unfollowing her, following Johnny Depp. For the most part, it's destroyed his credibility. It's destroyed his career. He's in these indie films, which he always did some indie films, but he's may never be in another blockbuster again, like what he had been at least. And this is all from speculation. There was never any hard evidence at all. With Richard Gadd, there's far more evidence that she was literally stalking him. And by her own admission, comes on to Piers Morgan, changes her story throughout the whole thing. I don't know him. He is not known to me. I've only met him 2 or 3 times. Then why would you tweet him, show up to his shows, like the things that you do admit to? Why are you admitting to this? Well, we were all friends, that was just friendly banter. Wait, 10 ago on this show, you said you don't know him, you're not friends, and that you've only met him a couple times, and now that is it's completely reversed. No, these are the ravings of someone who is not mentally well, someone who probably would stalk somebody. I'm not saying let's drag her out into the street and, I'm not saying let's do a purge on her. I'm saying let's get her some help. But let's definitely not let her run the board, sue Gadd, sue Netflix, and win all this money. Like, this cannot be the timeline where, oh wait, yeah, this is for sure the timeline we're living in.
That's what I think people need to understand when they start doing things in the court of public opinion. It sets bad precedents for actual legal cases, which further sets really bad precedents for everybody else. Because, again, should she have the book thrown at her? No, she clearly needs help.
Yeah.
But with everything else, it's like the victims are the ones taking all the blame instead of getting their justice, whether that be protection or the person involved being thrown in jail or getting mental help or what have you. And it's just like, yeah, in this case, it's like, is his life completely ruined because of the stalker? Well, I mean, no, he seems to be bouncing back. I mean, as far as I can tell, I don't know him. I don't know any more about his life than what this has brought forth. But I mean, for everybody else that has a stalker, or because how many cases have you heard where it's like, oh yeah, we tried to go to the police and nothing came of it. They said they couldn't do anything and they end up dead.
Yeah.
It's like that happens far too often.
Yeah, there's been times where people show up where there's filmed events and then somebody's like, oh dear, or say a John Lennon gets shot. We don't know what he's going to do. We don't know in the future as an artist, not to say that artists should be protected. They are the lifeblood of any culture. That's society. Society is driven. It's not by economics. It's not by politics. Those are a symptom of, art is like a response to those things, and that's what drives the culture. You can always tell if you look through history, wartime, art changes, peacetime, art changes. It is a mirror and a reflection, and it's how we can gauge the rings on our tree, like when we were doing well, when we were doing badly, but it's not always a mirror. Sometimes it is what drives things. I mean, look at all of whenever the most recent war that really impacted American society and culture was the Iraq War, when those especially the second Bush term, how many awesome punk albums were made. I mean, just now, they're releasing, I don't know why they're calling it, like, it looks like it's American Idiot 2. It's American Idiot 2020 because it's got the heart. It's supposed to be the 0, but it doesn't. It just looks like a 2. Anyway, never mind. That's where the 20th anniversary of that album. There's a reason why it was so impactful. It was the voice of that generation that was saying, we don't want this. Maybe retaliation, but not this. And when a crazy person whom you don't know what they're capable of, Laura Ray says that Fiona Harvey was quite violent in just the very short amount of time that she had dealt with her, that she worked up to that. It wasn't like it took 6 months. It was like 2 weeks, and she was already throwing things in an office setting. So when Richard Gadd says, like, over the course of a very long time that she worked her way up to violence, I believe it. Has he gone through bit by bit and said, like, what was dramatized, and what was not? No. I hope at some point maybe he does. That would clear the air a bit. He might be compelled to do so in court while ratings for this soar yet again on Netflix. And this is the other thing I'm afraid of, is that, and I think I mentioned this in our main show, it'll get taken off, that they'll block it somehow, and that this will get suppressed, and the only copies that will be made available will be bootlegs.
Yeah.
Because there's not physical media of this. They haven't released it. They need to do that now before this does go to court, and some rogue judge decides to say, like, yeah, I've heard enough. Pack it up, and that's it. And it'll be like the Disney Vault.
It seems to be the case with anything, not just stalking and anything. Like, anytime something bad happens, it's like, what's the easiest thing to throw under the bus? It's usually the art and not the perpetrators of the crime.
Yeah, the path of least resistance.
Because it's like, oh, what are we going to blame? Comic books. What are we going to blame? Music. What are we going to blame? Video games. Not what's actually wrong.
Yeah, which is usually that people, like, the stigma of seeking help, seeking therapy, seeking guidance, or even community, showing that sort of vulnerability and is considered weakness in at least American culture. And I think it's what has bred our violent society at the end. Germany and Japan have, like, the same video games. And they, like, Japan is like the birthplace of video games. Like, that is their cultures. Like, that's where they create. That's Nintendo, you know? So they love that. They don't have the same culture that we do. They, you know, there's a lot of martial arts that pervades in that culture. There's a lot of, you know, even like to carry weaponry, like a sword. That, I'm not saying businessmen do this on a regular basis. I'm saying it's in the art. It's in their cultural history. And it seems like teaching control and mastery over oneself is more important than being a Billy badass and carrying a gun around to what? Be the new sheriff in town? Or just show up at school and, you know, hate Mondays? I think this situation with Baby Reindeer should not be a condemnation on Baby Reindeer. It should be a wake-up call for everybody so that we can have a discussion about mental health. Never mind all of what the drills in the schools. That's a whole different situation. And think about it. What's the solution? It would be letting people talk to people, unless they don't want to talk to you. In which case, leave that person alone, Fiona. I don't know what else I really wanted to say. I mean, it was really just the dichotomy between if the sexes of these two people had been reversed, not only would Fiona have been the being Richard in this case, not only would she have been listened to more, but nobody would have taken Richard's side, the Fiona version of that. And not that I want to say, and that's the thing, is we all know this. Like, even as staunch a liberal as they come, I don't live in a mathematical equation. We can't just say that, like, well, you know, if it was the exact... No, we all know that if the roles had been reversed, it would be different, and that she would have been listened to more, especially with all the evidence. I don't know why it is, like, he changed one thing in this that's not... And then where do you go? I don't, and it's a dramatization. It says that at the end of every episode. I mean, it's a little glib to say. I'm not reading verbatim from it. I think I did in the main episode. I'm just saying I want to believe survivors and I want people to be able to get help. I also have to temper that with knowing sometimes people make things up and sometimes they also lie. So how do you sort this out? You look into the evidence, you look at the person's character. That's what a court case is meant to do. I really hope that if this does go to court, and then sometimes you can get screwed on something. Yeah. Sometimes you can be less credible than you hope. So then at least how you come off. I think Richard showed a very vulnerable side of himself. I think he will be able to do more of that if he is asked to testify. I hope he does. I want to hear from him because he has remained extremely silent on this, except to release some physical letters, and even that didn't come with a statement, like he didn't shoot a little Instagram clip. He's just eating up those awards, and good for him because he made a great piece of art. And it should not be, I wish that we did treat the sexes more fairly, more equally. I'm just saying that's where we're at now. I hope that in the future more men will be able to be listened to when they have situations like this. And that can come forward and say, this happened to me too, and have it not be based on gender or sex. That when we take care of victims, that we don't look at, because I think it's counterproductive to look at women as victims. Solely. That's not just it's men are victimized. I don't have the statistics in front of me because it's not something like just as much. It's that they don't come forward. Yeah. So the statistics are skewed heavily because we just simply don't know the real numbers. The men that do are ostracized or not taken seriously, such as this case. Yeah. So that's unless you have something.
I was going to say, I think the main takeaway is, show aside, this incident aside, it shouldn't matter what your gender is, what side of the political fence you're on, what your sexual orientation is, what your religious beliefs are. A victim is a victim, and they should be helped. And the abuser is an abuser, and they should either face their consequences or also get the help they need. Because I think in a lot of cases, it's like the victim is, I don't know, usually only justified after the fact. It's and not during, or I should more say until they actually become a victim of a greater crime.
Yeah, because it has to escalate before we'll take something seriously. It's, maybe he was just flirting, or some other people give it justifications. And in Richard's case, it's, she was just coming to the bar over and over again, only on his shifts or waiting for him and following him around. This isn't really disputed. There's even the owner of the establishment has come forward to corroborate her behavior in that for Gadd, So we just, it's complicated. I get that it's complicated. I feel your frustration if you say to yourself, it's complicated and I don't know how to feel about it even still, if you have complicated emotions about it. Just strip the sexes away and look at it objectively if you can, and think about if there were just two people, how would you want to have been treated if even half of the stuff she did to him was true, much less how crazy it ended up getting. And if you say, well, he was dumb, he invited her into his life. He accepted the friend request. He responded to some of it. He didn't deal with it early on. These are the same arguments that we make that when we dismiss women. And you see how counterproductive those types of arguments are, no matter who the victim is, no matter what the gender is. So, yeah, we need to get that Epstein list out there. Anyway.
Yeah, it's going back, looking at the art over the time. It's people were fighting the same fight. We've always been fighting. It's why are we hating on each other? So I know I said main takeaway, but I think the final takeaway is be there for one another, love each other. And yeah.
And I actually have a solution. I think that they should be forced to edit the show. He should have to change those tweets that she had sent him to not be verbatim what she said, if those were the case. Only similar. I think that should fix everything. Yeah, that'll wipe away all the bullshit. Also, since she self-identified, I think that would have happened either way. We'll never know that. That's the thing. She would have known it was her. even if he didn't have those tweets on there, even if he didn't use her syntax or the way that she talked or the cadences, she would have come forward if it was just because those were the things that led people to her, were the tweets, because they're still up. So if she, and I fully believe this because she's an attention whore, if it were just Jessica Gunning, who does not look like her, they don't have the same color hair, she's a larger woman, and she's not even, she just did the Scottish accent. Okay, well, how many obese Scottish women are there in the world? Just one? Just Fiona. Fancy that. So if he hadn't used any of those things, if he had just used Jessica Gunning and had her basically channel her, and she did such an amazing job in the performance, Fiona still would have come forward.
Yeah.
She still would have said it was her.
I think it comes down to attention and money.
Yeah.
Because
she wanted more.
Yeah. If the show hadn't have been a hit, then I don't think she would have came out.
No. And even then, maybe. It's even that's possible, to try and grab as much from it as possible because it's on a world stage. Would she have gotten on Piers Morgan if the show had not gone viral? Probably not. But even then, it was a cyclical thing. Like it had high numbers, but then it stayed up because people like me heard about the controversy because she'd gone on Piers Morgan, and then I watched the show, and then I got you to watch the show. So
and now we're telling other people to go watch the show.
Yes. At the end of the day, I'm a little nervous about the case. It teeters back and forth between what's being said and what's going on in that. I don't want to get too into that here. Perhaps we'll drop some update in a few months when more comes out. But for right now, it's just people parsing through her Facebook posts and the emails, of which there are a lot. So, yeah, these are just our opinions about this. I think we should take victims seriously. I think we need to address that, especially with the culture that's been created in specifically Hollywood. I can only speak from what I've heard about that. I am not in that culture, but it's bad from the evidence we've been given already from a few notable people, and one big one that's recent. It with Biggie's friend, Biggie Smalls.
I hardly think they were friends, given what has been said recently.
So, this stuff happens and it goes on and it's real. But is it every single time? Maybe not. So you have to take each case by case. I've listened to Gadd's case, and I am more inclined to believe him. He made a dramatized version of what happened. Is every moment of that true? No. He freely admits that with the disclaimer at the end of the show. Make of it what you will. I'm just saying, of the people lying, she can't keep her story straight between sentences. That's it. Whereas he actually said, what I'm showing to you is a mixed piece of media. And I think that's all I've got to say on the matter.
Yeah, there might be more later. We'll see. But if you made it with us this far, thank you. Like and subscribe. Follow us on our social media. Just remember, love one another, help each other out. Place the blame where the blame needs to be placed and not on the victims. And until next time, see ya.